not sure that Kyler Murray is big enough. This is Tom Brady. He's not just going to retire. Whitey, big fan of the show. Appreciate I've got Bryan Murphy to my left, making sure everything's smooth, crispy, buttery. James Harden is systematically ruining the game of basketball. He's the most overrated player. And there you are, the Chicago Bears with a championship defense. And Mitch, I'm sure Dancing with the Stars is happy to have Antonio back. If you thought you were going to get Zion, that's your bad.
You are now listening to Open Season. Your host, Billy Allen.
Hello! All right, I am Billy Allen, sitting next to Frankie Bratica. We are live from Seasons 52 here in Chestnut Hill, where Bryan Murphy produces the show. Call us up, 617-702-2542. We're talking about a whole lot today. We had some pretty sad news out of California. Unfortunately, Tiger Woods has been involved in an auto accident. We'll be hearing a little bit of sound about that. Also, Cam Newton and a camper are going at it. I mean, it just can't get any worse for the potential quarterback scenario for the New England Patriots. And Fernando Tatis inked a 14-year deal. We talk about the Celtics, their latest struggles as we go around the NBA. Dame Lillard not involved in the starting lineup for the Western Conference. Draymond Green getting kicked out of a game the other night in a loss. But first, like I said, some pretty sad news out of California today. Tiger Woods involved in a single-car crash. Sounds like there are some fractures to both of the legs. We've got a couple details from ESPN.com. Let's let that play.
News coming out of the state of California just after 7:12 a.m. Pacific, 10:12 Eastern Time. Tiger Woods, 15-time major championship golfer, was involved in a serious car accident, a one-car accident. And according to the L.A. County Sheriff's Department, it was a rollover accident in which Tiger Woods had to use the jaws of life to extract him from the car. Here's what we know right now. His agent, Mark Steinberg, just put out a statement moments ago saying that Tiger confirming that he was in a single-car accident this morning in California where he suffered multiple leg injuries. He is currently in surgery, and we thank you for privacy and support. That, again, coming from his agent, Mark Steinberg, who
So, yeah, some pretty sad stuff. We're trying to figure out as many details as we can and don't know quite what was involved in the accident just yet, but it doesn't sound great. As some of this news comes out, Frankie, and we were talking about maybe Tiger potentially not being able to come back, obviously we hope it's good, but it sounds like he may not be able to come back. So if that is it for Tiger Woods, what is his legacy going to be?
I mean, his legacy is that he's the second best golfer of all time and arguably the most dominant. I mean, I don't think anybody in Vegas has ever been a favorite over the field more times in more majors in an individual sport than Tiger Woods. I mean, we'd have to go back and check it, but I can tell you that growing up as a kid, Tiger versus the field was the only argument you could have versus the field in professional sports.
Yeah, and I mean, when Tiger was up, there was no coming back. When Tiger was winning after the third day in the tournament, there was no chance. How many people beat themselves going against Tiger Woods? Yep. So many people came in second place just because he was that ultimate competitor. You just couldn't touch him. And, I think unfortunately this is going to go down as just a pretty sad story because we're now looking back at that Thanksgiving Day was 2009 now. So this has been 12 years really that he's been really troubled. If he could have stayed on the rails till he was 40, if he could have stayed on for just a couple more years, you've got to assume he had won 15 majors up until 2009. So
14.
He clearly is going to, crush that mark if he could have just stayed on the rails a little bit. So it's just crazy that we're sitting here and 13 years later, he's only won one more major.
I know we're probably not going to do a lot of time on this. It's a very sad story. But like I said before the show, what I'm going to say right now, it's extremely important to mention that at the moment, there's no foul play suspected. No booze, no drugs suspected at this moment in time. His car was headed northbound. It ended up found on the southbound side after crashing through the median and rolling over. So, this is a serious, serious accident brought out by the jaws of life. This is if he comes back and plays professional golf, which, by the way, if I was putting money on it, I'd bet on him doing it. I mean, he'll never be Tiger again, but he hasn't been Tiger in, what do you say, 12 years? So, I mean, he'll come back, but he'll be a shell of himself. I mean, this is serious.
Yeah, and I mean, with people already saying how tough it would be for him to come back after the potential fracture, you almost see this as something where, he's going to motivate himself. This is a guy that's used the, whether it's been the Marines to motivate him or some of the different training methods that he's had over the year. You mentioned, steroids and different things like that, but, this guy has done everything he could to motivate himself from a really young age, hold himself to the absolute highest level. So, if he comes back, it would obviously be an incredible story. It's amazing how much pull Tiger still has. I was getting texts from people all over the place. It's like people who don't even pay attention to sports really care about this story, really care about Tiger one way or another. People love him or hate him. He was a guy who, got all the old white guys and back into it and stuff like that. So it's just it's crazy the pull that he has, and we're all hoping for the best for Tiger. If you want to call in and talk about your favorite Tiger memories, the phone lines are open, 617-702-2542. As we shift a little bit into the MLB, just a couple things to hit on there. We obviously have our own JD Martinez.
Same player.
I don't want to talk about JD Drew, but I don't really want to talk about Martinez either, but I think his comments were amazing today, coming out and saying that really didn't get prepared for the season last year, didn't hit for a couple months before it, wasn't sure what he was going to do. In terms of going into the bubble or anything like that, I mean, I just think it's absolutely inexcusable. A guy that gets paid $20 million, this is your job. For all of us, we're hoping that we're lucky enough to have a job, and this is a guy that can't even go into the batting cages a couple days a week. I mean, this is pretty pathetic stuff, huh, Frank?
Let me be concise. This is indicative of how every Boston team approached the bubble. The Celtics did not show up ready. The Bruins did not show up ready. JD Martinez did not get in the batting cages before the regular season. What the F? This was the entire approach of all Boston teams. And just so we're clear, the Red Sox have had a bad approach for 2 straight seasons. The year that they were defending the World Series championship, they were talking about how great they were going to be, their quest to repeat. They were shite. They've had a bad approach for 2 straight off seasons. They worked their pitchers strangely 2 off seasons ago. I mean, JD Martinez telling me this is nothing I didn't know from watching him play.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, did you even really have to know his comments to know that he didn't step in a batting box much last year? I mean, the guy could barely even hit his weight. I mean, just a guy that this lineup has depended on to really be the center piece of it. Just completely didn't come to play last year. I just find it really inexcusable. It's like, come on, dude. And all these people, it's like, you don't even get in shape for the season. I mean, this is what you're doing.
But he watches all that film, Billy. But JD Martinez watches all the film, and he helps Boston hitters get better for the batting box because they watch all that film. He's doing all of that off-season work. Aren't you paying attention, Billy?
I couldn't hate the guy more. I mean, really. It's just... It's a bunch of crap, and I feel like he's just a very unlikable guy. And it's like, do you even have to come out with that? I mean, just don't be that honest. Say that you did. I mean, the guy just completely mailed it in last year,
but
and
a
lot of people on this team did. I mean, this whole organization, it's like if any other organization had won 4 championships in the time span that we're talking about with the Red Sox,
their fan base would be happy.
Exactly. But this one, we're pounding our fists.
Well, this one sells you bricks. This one sells you bricks and has weird cap restrictions. And just the Red Sox have been unlikable since we won. And I'm sorry to say that, but we were lovable losers for a very long time. The Red Sox in the last 12 years have been schizophrenic. They've been excellent or horrible.
First place, last place. First place, last place. No in between.
I just don't get it. And we haven't had a farm system in about a half a decade. I mean, the last great Red Sox farm system player was who? Pedroia, Ellsbury, Bard. Those are all pre-2010. I mean, it's been a bad run. Maybe Devers. We can go Devers or Bogarts. But, again, those were lucky draft picks you got from the schizophrenia. You had high draft picks during certain years. It's like you got Benintendi, and Benintendi's no longer here. So it didn't always work.
Yep, and obviously we had the Johnny Damon thing come out. A former Red Sox the other day.
Former Yankee.
Gotta like his quote that going to jail sucks. Did you guys happen to see that? Was one for the that was one from the clippings that really stood out. I mean, Johnny Damon, never the smartest guy. I think the other big baseball note, we should definitely talk about this. We have a clip actually from. We have a clip. He was on the Scott Van Pelt show the other day, but Fernando Tatis getting the 14-year deal. We'll talk a little bit about that. Let's listen to Fernando Tatis and Scott Van Pelt talk about that deal.
Happy's a good place to be, and the thing I love about this is that they didn't have to come to you this early, right? I mean, they didn't have to at all, and you didn't have to give up your late 20s when you could have really gone for who knows how much money, but I think it speaks to a rare relationship between player and organization where you guys truly do have the same goals in mind. How did you guys create what you've got?
Mm-hmm. That's right. You said they didn't have to come to me and didn't have to, sell my years or how people want to put it. But, there's a special relationship over here. And a big factor of that is, how they see me. As a player, and what I feel like, what I can do add to this organization, and it's just a special bonding all the way around, and just the fact that I can stay on one team and fulfill my career, I feel like that's over expectation over any contract.
So there you have it, Fernando Tatis Jr., 22 years young at the shortstop position. 39 home runs in his first 150 games at the shortstop position. That's an MLB record. This guy is now locked up until age 36, all the way through his prime. How many times have we seen these contracts where, whether it's Albert Pujols, whether it's A-Rod, these guys are signed until age 42, 43. This one actually seems to make a little bit of sense, though, Frank, for both sides.
This is one of the rare times where a 14-year contract seems reasonable. I thought it was reasonable for Mahomes. This is excellent. For a baseball contract, A-Rod was paid $28.7 million. The last 2 years he was on the team, he was batting under 250. And then he was paid $28.7 million to be a hitting instructor for the team so that he could still get paid and not play. For them
you better find some purpose for him when he's getting 28.7.
Sure. But this guy, the average, I believe, of the contract is 24.6. I looked it up when they did it. I haven't looked it up for the previous 4 days, but I believe it's 24.6. For a guy of that magnitude, for a power-hitting shortstop, for a guy whom you've now signed up for his entire prime, rare time where you're paying him for what he's going to do and not what he's done. On top of that, he's exciting. How many jerseys does this guy sell? With the bat flips, the clutch performances. For a young kid, he's really got it all.
Yeah, and this kid really is like the next Mahomes probably for baseball at least, or is at least being touted that way. And you sign a guy for that long all the way through his prime, you just can't really there's so many bad contracts in baseball. You almost have to wonder, though, is he going to want to rip up this deal at some point? You mentioned that it's only $24 million over the next however many years, and Scott Van Pelt even kind of mentions it a little bit in that interview. When he's 28, 29, if he had gone to the free agent market, is this a guy that could have commanded $40, $45 million a year or something like that? Is that still going to make sense for him?
Everything's relative, and I hate to say that because it's kind of a cop-out, but look, here's the deal. He'll be upset when he's 28, 29, and probably 30. But it's a 14-year contract. So for 11 out of 14 years, he'll be pretty effing okay with it. And I think that's what you're looking for. Again, most of these contracts come when players are either in their prime or exiting their prime. These contracts come at 27, 28, 30. They almost never come at, 22?
22, yeah.
So, this is the one, as I said, it's the one type of 14-year contract where you're paying him for what he's going to do and not what he's done. It's completely worth it.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. You wonder if there's going to be more deals done like this. I feel like, when you saw the Bryce Harper deal get done, didn't really know if that one made a whole lot of sense, and just wonder, is this where baseball is trending? Are they trending to these? Because it felt like for a while, teams were not doing these long-term deals. Like, you were not doing your 8-year deals anymore. They were harder to come by. You're doing more of your 5-6-year deals, paying guys a premium to kind of stay there for like 5-6 years.
What's the last one, Giancarlo?
Giancarlo.
Is that the
did,
last? Is that the last massive deal that we've seen in baseball? And he went to the Yankees. So again, for the Padres to be wheeling out this dough, having already had Manny Machado, I mean, this is a real turn of a shift in paradigm from the San Diego Padres. That being said, I still don't think they're that good. I really don't. I mean, I think their lineup will be fine. I don't know what they have for pitching, and pardon me for not being well up to date on the Padres. I'm not sure that franchise has ever been worth mentioning. But they are. That's what happens when you don't have a cap and you decide you're finally going to spend money.
Yeah. Well, I think that's pretty much going to cover it for baseball, unless anybody else has anything to say. Phone lines are open, 617-702-2542. With that, we are going to turn the page, keeping it pretty NBA heavy as we did last week. I feel like there's just a whole lot more to talk about there. Dame Lillard just seems to always not get quite the credit he deserves. This is a guy that I've been saying, if he was on a top team, he probably would have been in the MVP race for the last however many years. I mean, what he's done with his clutch shots, and he's a guy that hasn't even been in the position to hit as many clutch shots as he could. Is he the best clutch shooter of the generation? I had heard a quote the other day. Is he the best clutch shooter of this class of NBA players? And hasn't even really had the chance to be.
So that's a great question that I didn't know was coming. No. He's well up there, but no. He's not the most clutch. LeBron has more than him. I'd rather have KD taking it. But his numbers are up there. I mean, I think Dame Lillard is one of the most underrated players in the NBA. Because he plays in the Western Conference, I believe he has 0 All-Star starts. That's unfair. That's not indicative of the NBA player that he's been over the balance of his career, but that's what happens when you're in a guard-dominant Western Conference.
They were talking to Luka Doncic the other day, and he actually came out and said that himself that Dame should be starting over him.
And shouldn't he?
I mean, I think so.
Dame Lillard is better than Luka Doncic, and that's today. But
and Luka will probably have a better career.
He will.
Will probably be considered. He will probably be mentioned with the all-time greats, maybe. I mean, if he keeps his conditioning up there, probably be mentioned in a higher class than what Dame Lillard is. But yeah, I think Dame is definitely having a better year this year. He's had a great year the past couple of years. I mean, last year, he averaged 30 points a game on the season. He's damn close to doing it again this year. This guy averages like 25 points a game over his career. He's just been an absolute stud. So it's just hard to say a lot of bad things about him. He's absolutely lethal. When he gets it over half court, you've got to pick him up and play defense on this guy. He can hit a game winner from 46 feet away.
I think that's part of why he's so unsung. We've learned in modern NBA, if you want to, you can take a player out of the game. And it's so rare in basketball, and it's so hard, and it doesn't happen very often, and I understand that it's not apples to apples, but look, when Jordan played, zone defenses were outlawed. There is a way to take Dame Lillard out of a game, and it happens. It happens the same way. If you were a Celtics fan and you watched IT, that's what happened. There are certain players who, yes, Dame Lillard is a baller. He's a Hall of Famer. He's unbelievable, unsung, underrated. And yet, you can shut him down in a 7-game series. You can build a wall. You can zone it up. You can make other players on that team beat you.
You know what? I'm glad we didn't spend a whole lot of time on the Padres pitching because we have Josh Dodd chiming in saying the Padres traded for Darvish and Snell. And
Darvish
Musgrove,
has been injured the last 2 years.
Saying that they have pitching up the wazoo. So it's a glad thing we moved on from that quickly. But yeah, I mean, your point is totally a good one. I just feel like Dame Lillard, it's like there's always guys who kind of like just aren't looked at as favorably is how they actually play. Like I think of like Sean Marion almost as like an example of that. Like nobody really looks back on his defense or like there's just a lot of guys like this. And I feel like if Dame was on a better team, if he was more like these guys nowadays that are willing to go to different teams to increase your obviously you can't argue against what it's going to do. I mean, look at Anthony Davis just going from New Orleans to the Lakers. What this has done for his career, winning rings. I mean, being considered among the greats. But if Dame was willing to do that, I feel like he'd be right up in that category.
His game might get marginalized, though. You put him on a team where expectations are
Can he be your best player on a championship team? I mean, we talked so many times about how you can't have a point guard be your best player and people will go back to Steph Curry maybe being the only point guard in the last 20, 25 years to be the best point
Since
player.
Isaiah, look, here's how I'll answer that. And this is going to hurt, and I would hope that I am not asked a follow-up question. But if you put Dame Lillard on the Jazz instead of Donovan Mitchell, that team can win an NBA championship. They might be able to win one with Donovan Mitchell if he makes the step up to where Damian Lillard already lives.
So you're back on the Jazz again. I mean, this is 2 straight weeks that you're going to put your legacy on the line.
Not at all. Not at all. I'm simply saying that as a roster built and equipped and ready to go, and they're basically resting their laurels on whether or not Donovan Mitchell can make a jump. Well, guess what? Dame Lillard is already there. His game is already jumped up from Mitchell. So if you put the number 1 defense around him, you surround him with 3-point shooters, and you allow Dame to be Dame, yeah, no, I think you can win. And let me, I think the bigger point to your question, I think Dame Lillard is a 2. I think that's what you were looking for. He's Ray Allen, he's Paul Pierce, he's not Garnett, he's not LeBron, he's not Kobe. But you can win with him as your best player.
Well, we just got some comments out of the peanut gallery with Nick Smith's head exploding, followed by who is Joel Ingles guarding.
Joe Ingles.
And Josh Dodd saying, Jazz talk, always awesome. I gotta say, though, Frank, I mean, you don't believe that the Jazz could win a title with Dame as their best player, switching in for... I mean, I was just about to... Now you've got me totally reeling it on the other side of the argument. I was just about to say how good Dame is, and now you're putting him as the best player on the Jazz and then winning a championship? I just can't stand for that.
You asked me a question that we didn't discuss before the show. I gave you an answer, and just so we're clear, I'm bullish on the Jazz, which is also not on our agenda. Bullish on the Jazz. And as much as I like Donovan Mitchell's ceiling, and I err on the side of talent nearly every time, but Donovan Mitchell is not as good as Damian Lillard.
So tell me why the Jazz are going to win.
They're a top 5 offense. They're well deep. They're balanced, and they play defense. They're one of the last remaining great defenses left in the NBA. And again, I think their problem is going to inevitably be the same problem that is the Nuggets' problem, and that is the Celtics' problem, that would have been the Raptors' problem if Kawhi hadn't lived up to the billing. When you're reliant on one guy to take that leap, it's a huge question mark. I don't think Dame Lillard is a question mark. You replace Mitchell with Lillard, and they continue to play. And again, chemistry is a real thing. So if it doesn't have the transitive property, it won't work. If that team is just as good, plays just as well together, but you're only swapping 1 for 1, oh God, I have them possibly winning the championship now, as constructed. Give them Dame Lillard instead of Donovan Mitchell. Stop it.
With that sheepish grin on, I feel like this has to be a dream or something. I feel like this can't be real life.
You know they have the best record of the NBA. You act like I'm making it up. They have the best.
Yes, you're going on like all the stats you can write. They have a top 5 offense, a top 5 defense. Are they going to actually have that in the playoffs when it matters? I mean, how many times do we talk about when it matters? I mean, we always use that quote.
Have the Jazz been a bad playoff team?
Have they been a good one?
Yes. Since Mitchell got here? Yes, they've won 2 series in which they were the Vegas underdog, and they've taken 2 teams that were better than them to the limit. The Nuggets last year, yeah?
Sure.
I mean, they've been better in the playoffs than in the regular season, and they've made a steady incremental climb in the regular season every year. If you believe on the natural progression of things, that's where this team ends up.
You don't think that they're going to need a star, though, to go over the... I mean, it's a different thing to be good in the regular season, and then, yeah, maybe you win a series or 2. Sure, but... I mean, you're talking about this team,
star, right?
You're talking about this team, though, winning the whole thing or winning the championship. If you were to switch in Dame Lillard, I don't see it. They have Gobert. They have Jordan Clarkson, a guy who's having a great 6-man year, guy that's doing great off the bench. Can score you 40 points a couple times. What is it that you like Conley so much as a defender?
I think they're the deepest team in the NBA. And here's the thing that you're not mentioning that hasn't been brought up. What team in the league looks elite this year? What team in the league is such a GD juggernaut that you could not see them getting beat? Are we being realistic? The top 5 MVP candidates outside of LeBron are all on nearly 500 teams. There is no team or player playing that much incrementally better than the Utah Jazz. 0. Absolutely 0. This is not years of previous. And as I mentioned last week, this is not that Atlanta Hawks team. This is not a 60-win nonsense team who can't get there. They are reliant on if Donovan Mitchell can take a leap, and that's a big if. I've said that. But given the hypothetical, if that Donovan Mitchell if Was it Dame Lillard guarantee? Yeah, no. I'm not going to back down from that. That isn't for the show. No, that's legit.
So I just have to read some of these comments. We have Nick saying, "Stand your ground, Billy," followed by "bleep all of this." Josh Dodd saying it's going to be an even more incredible second-round exit, and man, if the Jazz win the title, Frank's going to go on an epic rant.
Imagine that show.
Followed by a big yuck. That show's getting canceled. That show is not airing. That show, I'm not even worried about that possibility happening. The Jazz are not going to win a title this year.
Okay.
Quote me. Write it down. The Jazz are not winning the title
this year. Do you feel the same way, given the hypothetical? Because your question was if they had swapped out Lillard for Mitchell.
Yes, I feel the same way.
Okay.
I think my point was going to be to talk about how good Dame is, but I don't think he can be the best player on that Jazz team winning the championship.
Okay.
You wouldn't take the Nets over them.
I'm not taking the Nets over the Lakers, the Clippers, the Jazz. No. I'm not taking them over Philly right now.
So if it was for your life, the question posed
I'm not taking the Nets. I'm almost never going to choose a team that doesn't play defense. So
the Jazz are your champion this year.
If I was putting money on it, I'd still go Lakers because I think Anthony Davis will be healthy for the playoffs. But second in those, first in those odds are probably Utah. But I'd rather put money on the greater talent because I err on the side of talent. But Utah's second. If AD, I'll put it to you like this: if AD doesn't play, my betting favorite is Utah. If AD can't get right, my betting, I like them over the Clippers. I like them over Brooklyn. Stop. Just stop.
3 of the top 10 players in the world versus Joe Ingles.
Can you tell me how many games they've been eligible to play together and how many times all 3 have been on the court, please? And then can you give me a percentage on those games, please?
Okay, they've gone on this West Coast road trip and beaten all these teams with 2 out of the 3 guys playing.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that the way they won...
You don't think all 3 will play together in the playoffs?
Do you think the way they won that game against the Clippers is a real call in a playoff game? Or do you think they lose that game?
Maybe they lose that game, but...
So, and again, my whole point isn't what's happening right now. The Nets are supposed to be this good. My point is they have all, to a certain extent, subjugated their ego to make this work. And when you're down in a 7-game series, multiple games, and you all want the ball, that is when I will find out if you've all actually subjugated your egos or if it's just easy because it's February.
If anybody wants to break Frank with a little bit of sense, 617-702-2542. Josh Dodd says, be selling insurance, Frank. He also asked a question, what do you think of the Clippers?
Okay. I'm glad we get to talk about this because I reveled in their defeat last year. I hate their approach to the game of basketball. Doc Rivers is overrated. Playoff P gave himself a nickname that he's only deserved prior to breaking his leg, which at this point was 6-7 years ago. I think they're good. I think they're really, really good. And I guess my biggest problem is that I hate Kawhi and I hate Paul George. So I want this team not to be good. But I love the way they're playing. I love the way they're balanced. I love them top to bottom. I think they have the better Morris twin. I think Ibaka, despite having worse numbers, is a better upgrade for that team. Styles make fights than Montrezl Harrell. I think his length and height is a problem and will be in a playoff series. And I think that when push comes to shove, the Clippers and the Lakers are the only 2 teams in the league where if all 7 games are under 100 points, I still have faith that they'll win. The Nets, let's face it, if I tell you ahead of the game that the score of the Nets game is 80-90, do you think the Nets won?
No.
So that's part of my issue.
Yeah, that's fair. I feel like I was not the biggest proponent of the Nets, but it's almost like
my hate for them just motivates you.
Yes. Yes.
Look,
opposites attract.
What did I say? What was it, Aaron last week? Look, man, I get that you've never seen this much accumulated talent on one team. You know what else you've never seen? A team with this bad a defense win anything ever. So, we'll see.
Yeah, I still remember last week when we killed Santa for Aaron and said that this has never happened since the team with this defense hasn't won a title since the 60s or something. What was that stat?
No team has won with a bottom 15 defense since the 60s. I did know last week which team that was. I don't know this week. I believe it was a Philadelphia 76er team. I'm not positive. But I am positive it hasn't happened since the 60s. Positive. And that's what this Nets team is. They're ranked 27th in defense, and that's after the Pacific West division run, in which they won, 5 out of 6 games. They won 4 of them without Durant. They beat every team in California, basically, which is some of the best teams in the NBA. That was absolutely super impressive. Like, without your best player, to win, to basically sweep that division is no small feat. I'm not here to disrespect players that are better than I've ever dreamed of being. I just also know historical precedent. And I know that they're very bad defensively. And here's the shocker. You know who's got the highest defensive win shares on that team? It's Jared Allen. It's Jared Allen. But can I tell you who's second since he's no longer on the team?
Harden?
Harden.
How is that even possible?
Because apparently he's not that bad at defense when he tries, which, by the way, is my biggest indictment on this whole team. None of them are good unless they try. You don't get to do that in the playoffs because every
Durant's
team you
good
face is
without
trying every night. Sure, he's the most efficient scorer we've ever seen. Like, I don't know what you want, but I'm not going to say anything bad about Durant. I think he's soft between the ears, but he's 7'1", can dribble like a point guard and pull up from 35. I'm not concerned with Durant.
So let's see if we can get you to say anything good about the Nets. I mean, they go 4 out of 5 on this West Coast trip.
I said it was impressive.
Mostly playing without Durant. None of that does anything for you. You're not excited, or you're not buying into the fact that Harden has definitely subjugated his ego a lot greater than I thought that he could have. And they're playing some pretty good basketball.
This is the best James Harden I've ever seen. Ever. The best LeBron I've ever seen.
I didn't think this efficient version of James Harden existed. I didn't think he could shoot this clip from 3, this clip from the field.
And that game winner. And that game winner, even in crunch time. Bro, the Nets have been good. It's been exciting to watch them. I err on the side of historical precedent, and they can't guard anybody. Can't stop a nosebleed. What did Mike Singletary say? Can't win with them. Can't do it. Can't do it.
Can't do it. Patriots, 24th defense in the league. Can't stop a nosebleed.
Can't stop a nosebleed.
All right. Well,
can I say something good about the Nets before you move on? Can I say something good about the Nets?
No, you're caught up. Yeah, sure. What do you got?
My biggest issue is that in the playoffs, if they face adversity, I have no idea how the 3 of them will respond. If they respond favorably, statistically, not likely. If they do, oh Jesus, am I going to be eating a lot of crow? Because I err on the side of talent, and I don't know a team that's been more talented than this.
I was going to transition to something else, but I guess while we're here, do you think that the Lakers will get it right this year? Like, do you think that the Lakers are pretty much out of it?
No. They have the best player in the world. Like, I'm not concerned. AD needs to be healthy. And what does concern me about LA, they're calling it a calf strain. Do you know what Durant had before he came back and tore his Achilles? A calf strain. A lie.
The calf is quite close to the Achilles.
Yes, a complete lie to motivate the player to come back early, which a lot of coaching staffs and medical staffs will do in professional sports. I do not want it for Anthony Davis. He's not the most durable player. If he legitimately needs 2 months, 8 weeks, 9 weeks to get this covered, and they fall all the way to the 7th seed, but he's healthy, they should err on that side. Because we mentioned last week, haven't mentioned it this week, LeBron's minutes, he's leading the NBA in minutes per game in the month of February. I don't want that either. I'd rather you lose some of these games, because guess what? You're losing them anyway. Stop overusing LeBron and let AD sit. What difference does it make if you're going on the road? There are no fans. Like, enough. Be smart, please.
Exactly. I mean, if you're a Laker fan or rooting for the Lakers to win the championship or something, I mean, you've only got 2 concerns. LeBron gets hurt, AD gets hurt. And, I mean, right now you are really jeopardizing number 1. And number 2 is already happening.
And number 3's gone, by the way. Didn't mention him. Schroeder, Ben gone. Just so we're clear.
So we wouldn't be a Boston sportscast if we weren't to talk about the Celtics a little bit. They've been having all kinds of problems, and we actually have a little bit of sound from Colin Cowherd, who talks about taking, as we've had the last couple of weeks, we've had people taking Danny Ainge to task, and Colin Cowherd does it once more.
So Joey and I have talked about this in the last several years. 3 words: go for it. I watched the Boston Celtics twice over the last 3-4 days. Boston would make an accountant proud. They're frugal. They develop players. They draft well. They're smart. They did everything right. They got the smart head coach. They win every trade. And I watched them yesterday blow a lead to a very average team, the New Orleans Pelicans. And my takeaway is this morning the Celtics are 6th in the East. Their roster doesn't have a legitimate big. Kemba Walker's deteriorating physically, and they don't have enough good players. They've become the Packers. Is that frugal, put their money away, pay off their house. But go look at the last 5 NBA champs. I'll read them for you. The Lakers, they went and got AD. The Raptors, they went and aggressively got Kawhi. The Warriors, they aggressively got KD. The Cavs, they got LeBron and Kevin Love. Heat, they got LeBron and Bosh. That's your last 5. Okay.
I have so much to say. Thank you for not even asking me how I feel. Jason Tatum is killing this team. In our intro, you say James Harden is systematically destroying the game of basketball, and at the time that you said that, you were 100% correct. You know who's killing the Boston Celtics right now? Jason Tatum's and his shit body language and his horrible shot selection. Jason Tatum in his career was in the playoffs at 20 years old. Was a plus 54 in the playoffs, took LeBron James to a Game 7, had a higher defensive win share percentage than Jaylen Brown. At 20 years old, this was a top 10 player in the NBA playoffs. Not the regular season that year, in the playoffs. At 20 years old. He has done nothing but regress. He's gotten worse at rebounding, he's gotten worse at passing, and he's gotten worse at being an NBA basketball player, and that's what's scary. I won't listen to he's just an ISO scorer. I won't listen to he's been overrated. No. That guy was talented. He got better in the playoffs at 20, at 21, and at 22. He'll be 23 this year, and I have no faith he'll take a next step because this body language is horrible. Doesn't take losing personally. Doesn't take defense personally. And when he's not hitting his shots, checks out completely. Nothing about him outside of his actual talent and ceiling are redeemable.
Yeah, I think when you talk about Tatum, you're talking about a guy that, what did he score, 6 points in the loss to the Pistons a couple weekends ago? I mean, absolutely inexcusable. This is a guy who cares more about his 2K rating. Like, they continue to play the clips about his 2K rating and him talking about that and going on about how much it matters. And he just really doesn't get the dog in him to play. It's like Jaylen Brown gets 25.5 points out of that body. Like, if you were to give him like the same like motivation, give Tatum the same motivation that Brown has, he'd probably average 35, 40 a game. You know, he's just dripping with talent. Feels like he doesn't even necessarily try super hard sometimes and is putting up 28, 30 points a game. So it's just like, I feel like, is he ever going to take the step? Like, is he an actual superstar? Go ahead.
So here are the numbers that I compiled because I err on the side of playoffs, I err on the side of ceiling. In the playoffs, Jason Tatum has played 45 games. He's 26-19. He's a plus 139 in 3 years. I believe that was 7 total series. Only one 7-game series. That was against Cleveland, previously mentioned, his 20-year-old season. He's been a plus player in every single playoff series except for one. And in that playoff series, he was a -7. And all of that came on their final game. It was a Game 6 loss in Milwaukee. They lost by 25. He was a -17 for that game. Or he would have been a plus player in that series too. He is money in the postseason. And even in the postseason, has bad body language. Can't be relied upon. The guy's just not a winner. The real issue here is that Jason Tatum is a superstar. In the same way Kyrie is a superstar, they are glorified number 2s with number 1 talent. They don't have the mentality to lead a team to the promised land, and that's what we're discovering about Jason Tatum.
Yep, we have Josh Dodd chiming in saying, nailed it with Tatum, played like garbage lately, doesn't even show up for first quarters, complains at literally every non-call.
The whole team. The whole team complains at every single call or non-call.
Yeah, I feel like there definitely are some excuses to go around this season, right? Like Tatum, he had COVID earlier, and you have heard reports that, you know, maybe his breathing hasn't been as good or something. Like, whether we want to believe it or not,
we don't.
I don't necessarily want to, but you heard things about Cam Newton too, maybe not being as effective. I mean, there may be something there. But then you're also talking about Marcus Smart being out with an injury. You're talking about Jaylen Brown having some type of injury as well. And Kemba's obviously been hurt and not shooting well. But every team has their issues. This team should be better than they are. They're missing a big again. Like, how many times are we going to look back at this Miles Turner non-trade? You hear Coward talking about it. Go for it. How easy would it have been to just get rid of that trade exception, make the trade happen and just get Turner for Hayward, and you could have even brought in Dougie McBuckets. How much better would this team have been if you could just have a decent big? I mean, you're dealing with Tristan Thompson being the best big that you have. No team is afraid to drive on this squad, and you even saw it in the New Orleans game the other night. All the foul calls were basically just because they were willing to just go to the rack.
The NBA
with no abandon.
The NBA should be embarrassed. That was one of the worst. That was one of the least climactic and least basketball rich end to a basketball game I've ever seen. Between the reviews, the bad calls, the makeup calls, what is going on? And to bail the refs out, because I don't think the players were effing helping them. Tristan Thompson, what are you doing? You're trying to draw a charge on the final play of the game. Just stick your hands up. You're one of the only players in the NBA that weighs the same amount as Zion. Can you just put your hands up and stand there? No, you're going to draw a charge with 4 seconds to go as he's driving to his strong hand.
Did he not age 5 years in coming over from the Cavaliers?
Listen, Tristan Thompson and Jeff Teague. Look, man, I picked them to be first in the Eastern Conference and come out of the East.
I thought they were going to have a great season, too.
I was singing the praises of Teague and Thompson. Yes, Thompson aged 5 years. And that's not the worst free agent pickup. Jeff Teague is not an NBA player anymore. Not an NBA player anymore. He's worse than you name him player on the Celtics. Naismith, Carson Edwards, Romeo Langford. All three of those guys are bad NBA players, and they're all better than Teague. There's a problem there.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I was honestly pretty bullish on Teague. I've liked him in the past. I thought he was pretty quick. I didn't think it meant good things for Kemba if they were willing to bring in a point guard that was as good as him.
Definitely they knew something was wrong with his knee. That's how I feel about the decision to bring him in.
And that gets back to a little bit of news that we heard today from Rick Bucher talking about the fact that a lot of teams were upset with Danny Ainge really trying to do anything he could to trade Kemba Walker in the offseason this year. So it goes back to, again, Danny trying to make any trade for, used groceries, and how many times has he done these trades where he's trying to get rid of Isaiah Thomas, a point guard who's under 6 foot. He's trying to get rid of Kemba Walker, a point guard that's under 6 foot. It's like this guy just will not make a move in which he is not clearly benefiting from it. So it's just like,
well, the Isaiah trade, right? We sent the trade over, they accepted it, they saw the physical, and then all of a sudden we owed them more compensation. So any GM or talent evaluator who tells you that this is the offseason that put the nail in the coffin in terms of Danny Ainge is a suspect player, stop it. Like, no, wrangling his best friend Mikhail didn't tell you that. Hamstringing Prokhorov his first 2 years as an NBA owner didn't show you that. Trying to trade Isaiah, them seeing the physical, them saying, whoa, forget this Ante Zizic. We need 2 more picks because his knee is shot. His hip is done. I mean, this is hardly the first time we've heard this.
So we actually haven't talked about Demarcus Cousins yet. He's on the trade block. Not on the trade block. He was released by the Rockets. Things just kind of get worse for him. But I think he's still in good shape. I think he can still play well. In games where he's gotten a lot of minutes recently, he's performed pretty well. They obviously have a younger future there and some people to play. Matt White chiming in saying that the Celtics should go for it and pick up Cousins. What do you think about that? I think he'd actually be a great addition here. For what they need a big and they need shooting. And he delivers both of them. You're going to laugh before you even get a chance to talk? They need a big and they need shooting. He can do both of those things. He couldn't stand in the paint and gum it up a little bit more for some of these guards that are just going to drive to the basket with no abandon, no regard for human life. It's just like you can abuse the Celtics right now. Who is stopping them? Rob Williams, who plays 12 minutes a night?
Don't you talk about Time Lord like that. But listen, is DeMarcus
you and I both know that as good as Rob Williams was ever going to be, he's never going to consistently get 25 minutes on this team ever, it seems like.
He can be what Dikembe was for the Houston Rockets. Robert Williams is not going to make or break us. He's a depth piece, and who cares about him? Listen, here's my point. I think Demarcus Cousins, if we could get him, I'd give him the whole trade exception, which I think is $29 million. I'd have to double check it. I believe it's 29. I'll give him $29 million for the rest of this year. Is Demarcus Cousins coming here? No. He's going to either LA team. He's going to Brooklyn. Like, what are we doing here? Like, yeah, I would love to get DeMarcus Cousins here and go all in. Is DeMarcus Cousins coming here? No? Why are we talking about this? DeMarcus Cousins is unbelievable, and he hasn't been DeMarcus Cousins in about 5 years. Any team who's close. LA, both teams should be jumping on this. If you're the Celtics, you should try and get this done. I have no faith that he's coming here.
I have no faith that he would come here either. Maybe if you said we'll play you 30 minutes a night. I mean,
Which we won't. Brad Stevens will not do that. He'll have him in a cascade of rotations that don't matter.
5 minutes one night, 30 minutes the next. As we try to figure it out on the fly with guys like Nesmith and, it's just been
horrible to watch.
Things have not been good.
This is an inherently unlikable Celtics team. Whether you're a casual fan, a hometown fan, or a national viewer of the team, this is not a fun product to consume. They don't have a lot of assists. They have high turnovers, high percentage of isolation basketball plays. They've clearly tuned out their coach. This is not a fun team to watch from any perspective, whether you're an actual fan of the team or they happen to be playing your team. Like,
quite frankly, if you're a team going against the Celtics, you're thinking, okay, if you're a player going against them, you're like, all right, I'm going to have my season high. We just saw how much Zion and Brandon Ingram were licking their lips going against the Celtics the other night. And they have a franchise night with the greatest comeback they've ever had in franchise history against the Celtics. So it's just a team that you can do a lot of damage against. Former Celtic Isaiah Thomas had 19 in a return as the U.S. beat the Bahamas. Is he a guy that might be back in the NBA around the trade deadline?
I hope. Let's be optimistic here. Look, I'm 5'8". I was able to dunk for about 6 years of my life, and it took everything within me to get it done. If Isaiah Thomas can play in the NBA, he should be back in the NBA. Look, I didn't want the Celtics to pay him. I didn't want them to back up the Brinks truck. He gave us everything he had. He gave that Celtics team everything he had. I mean, he came back after his sister was unceremoniously taken off this earth a little bit too early. He came back after, partially tearing his hip, tore his whole GD hip. I mean, he's committed to the game of basketball. This is a man who, speaking of Boogie Cousins, once punched that man in the face because you're not fitting to bully me like that. Like, Isaiah Thomas, I love him through and through. I love original Isaiah Thomas even more. But this little dude, if he can be in the NBA, should play. I'm just not convinced a 5'7" basketball player who's torn his hip in the last 5 years can give you that. Like, do we know if Isaiah Thomas can play back-to-backs? Do we know if he's actually healthy or can pass a physical? I'm aware he helped the U.S. beat the Bahamas, but so could you. So is Isaiah Thomas back, or is he just beating up on the Bahamas?
I mean, I'm much more inclined to believe the second thing. I mean, obviously I want the best for Isaiah Thomas and hope he can get back to some viability. I mean, I did think it was hilarious, after he wanted the Brinks truck, kind of, having to go down. And I think he was coming from a $100 million contract. I think he got like a $2 million offer with the Nuggets.
It's not his fault. He would have got that money from somebody. It wasn't going to be us. He was going to get $100+ million from somebody had he not torn his hip out of its socket. He had the Bo Jackson injury. And people act like, oh my goodness, why can't he come back? It's only basketball. Because he's 5'7" and it came out of its socket. That's why. And I hope he can. But I have no faith in that. He hasn't been the same player in 5-6 years. I have no faith in that. And I hope it happens, but no, I'm not putting money on that.
Yeah, I mean, even when he was trying to come back with teams like the Lakers a few years ago, he still wasn't playing back-to-backs then, so it would just be hard to believe that he could now. Hopefully he could come back in some capacity, but how about this the other night? Draymond Green goes nuts at the end of the game against the Hornets, playing without Curry, a game you can't give away. He absolutely does that, and I thought this was just really refreshing to hear Steve Kerr and some of the other people put a lot of just put a lot of blame on Draymond, and Draymond actually coming out and saying that he was wrong. How many times has that guy cost that team wins? I mean, afterwards he said that he was more upset getting kicked out of that game than he was in Game 5 of the Finals against LeBron. Draymond Green, a guy that you're always vouching for, he's a better than Marcus Smart, but how many wins has he actually cost that team? And he is just not as good. Mr. Single Triple out there. What's he averaging? 3 points.
You done?
3 points, 7 assists, 6 boards.
You done?
He's 30.
You done?
This is a former Defensive Player of the Year.
You done?
How good is this guy?
Draymond. Whoa. The argument has never been how good is Draymond Green, because I'm not going to go out on an olive branch and tell you how good Draymond Green is. My point has always been how valuable Draymond Green is to a team that has 2 or 3 of the best shooters of all time, depending upon what year you're talking about. A guy who can guard 1 through 5 and actually hit an outside shot, which he hasn't been able to do in 2 years, admittedly. I think that guy was incredibly valuable to that team. That death lineup.
What's he shooting? 35% from 2 this year?
That death lineup only worked because Draymond Green could play center and spread the floor, which he did during that year. Don't lie to yourself.
Yeah, it didn't work because they had Steph Curry and Klay Thompson, 2 of the best shooters of all time.
Hold on. Had both Steph Curry and Klay Thompson scoring less than their season averages. One of them was hurt. And how do they continue to play at the exact same rate? With their 2 best players no longer playing like their 2 best players, how did they still proceed in the playoffs?
Oh, because Draymond Green was playing that much better?
Because he was valuable. Because he was defensively on pick and rolls and switching valuable. Because he could run an offense from the point forward position. I don't really want to get into defending Draymond.
It's like with Belichick. The end is going to be ugly for him because he's a loudmouth, he's braggadocious, and he just, at the end of the day, he's just not putting up the amount of stats, the amount of production that you would be hoping for a guy that's this he's just not worth.
Why would you call 11 rings? Is that really the perch you want to go on? One's got 8 rings, one has 3 rings. Why would you?
Oh, 8 rings? Are we counting the rings that he got as an assistant now?
Okay, one has
Mr. Petty Belichick over there.
Okay, they have 9 rings. That's still a butt ton of rings, buddy. And listen, here's my point. Here's my whole point. He has cost them an entire playoff series getting ejected.
Finals.
As much as you tried to project me as, I'm not a Draymond Bobo. He was the most valuable team that made that particular team, a team that came into a league where threes.
You're as Bobo as it gets.
No. That team came into a league where threes will not win you a championship. And I guarantee you that the only reason threes won them a championship is because they had a guy who could shoot threes and guard 1 through 5. Do not discredit that. But he cost them an entire finals. And he cost them a game without Steph Curry. You said it was you can't waste that game. You can lose that game if you're not up with 5 seconds to go before you get ejected, you dumb piece of garbage. Like, Draymond Green is absolutely, not now, but during their run of dominance, their most valuable player. What he was costing them a championship, and what he did the other night was cost them a game. And just so we're clear, he said he was more upset getting ejected from the other night than he was in 2015. Well, in 2015, you were suspended, your team lost game 6.
Talking to the mic.
And then you ended up calling Kevin Durant from your car in the parking lot 2 games later. So this one may have bothered you more, but this one didn't have you calling another player from another team crying in your vehicle. That was clearly the biggest mistake you've made, and you haven't learned, or you wouldn't have gotten ejected the other night.
I'm just happy to see Draymond Green kind of like coming back down to earth. It's like, how much is this guy going to talk? He gets on the stage and talks about the whole Andre Drummond stuff. It's like, dude, we don't care what your opinion is. When you average 3 points, you get 7 assists and 5 boards? I mean, how many guys in the NBA could do this? It's just like, you're 30. Like, how are you done as a player?
Because he's a Rodman. Because Draymond Green is not the most talented guy in the NBA. That's why. Because he was shooting above his boobies.
You didn't think he would be completely done at 30?
I didn't think he'd be going much past 31. I mean, this is about his ceiling. How good was he going to be? I mean, he's in 15, 16, 17, he shot something like 34% from 3. He was not that good. He was never going to be that good. This was never sustainable. And, I mean, LeBron was able to sit in that chair for, 5 years of his career? It's just tough to play both sides of the ball for that long. Draymond Green was always going to deteriorate and decay early, especially when you're playing 110 games a year because you went to 5 straight finals or 4 straight finals. Sorry.
So we're gonna blame the fact that he decayed on going to 5 straight finals. I mean, how many guys have been great?
No, he was playing above his ceiling. He was quite literally playing above his ceiling. Very few players do that. He was doing that deep into seasons for a fair amount of seasons. I'm going to blame the fact that he's not very good on the fact that he wasn't very talented, trying very hard, and has now played 800 to 1,000 NBA games. That's what I'm going to base it off of.
Oh, there's no way he's played that many games. We'll pull that up, but
including the playoffs.
Oh, including the playoffs? Maybe.
It's called mileage for a reason. How many NBA minutes does he have? 20,000? Yeah, I didn't expect him to play much past that. His speedometer, he's not an elite player. It's not that high to begin with. Valuable as I think he was never destined to be great for that long.
So, Embiid and Murray both dropped 50 the other night. Murray doing it without even hitting a free throw.
Not one.
Which is more impressive to you, Embiid going over the 50 mark or Murray doing it without even attempting a free throw?
In a vacuum, Murray's performance was more spectacular, more surprising, harder to do, all of those. I mean, he's the first player to ever score 50 without a single free throw, so naturally, it's a more impressive feat. What do I think is more indicative of who that player is? I think Embiid. I think Embiid needs to start putting up these sorts of numbers. Jamal Murray's just going to do this once in a while. Jamal Murray will give you 5 and then 50, and that's okay because it averages to 25, sure. And the rest of his team is good enough to not lose those games when he only scores 5. Joel Embiid, that team revolves around him. Completely revolves around him, doesn't play the same when he's not there. His biggest case for MVP is their win-loss record with him versus without him. He's unbelievable, and he had 17 rebounds and 4 blocks that game. Like, Joel Embiid, I think, him getting 50 is a bigger feat. I think it's harder for him to get 50 than it is Jamal Murray, due to style of play, due to all of it. I also think that Joel Embiid had a bigger defensive responsibility, and I believe he played less minutes, but I didn't look it up before the show. That's my fault. Host not being good enough. But I'm pretty sure he played less minutes. He had more rebounds. He had more blocks. He had a bigger responsibility and impact on the defensive side of the ball. I think he had the more complete game. Which 50-point performance was more impressive, Murray? Which game was better? Which one would I rather have? Which player am I taking 10 times out of 10? Embiid.
Yeah, I've got to pretty much agree with you there. I think that I can't be that impressed over a game where you didn't even shoot a free throw. Like, you weren't even trying to force the issue.
But what was he, 21 of 25? I mean, that should impress you, but it's not going to happen again. Not from you, not from Jordan, not from nobody. It didn't happen before you. That's a product of today's game. That's evolution of the game. That's a great scorer in an easier league. That's all. No disrespect to him.
All right. I guess one other thing I wanted to get in before we draw a close to this is Zach Levine has really been playing at an extra level. We talked about how certain guys have fizzled out. You were talking about how Draymond Green's fizzled a little bit with all the mileage. One guy who hasn't really has been Zach Levine, coming off a rough injury. Still only 24 years old. A guy that was pretty much known to be a great dunker. He's really become a great player. Feel like he's just one of those guys that, you know, maybe if like the Celtics were able to get him or really it's like he's kind of just playing on a team where he's not going to really get noticed as much. But he's doing big things in Chicago this year. It feels like every time I look at the box score, there's a 38. There's something like that in terms of the points.
We don't have a lot of time left. I'll get to Levine. The Minnesota Timberwolves organization hates good guards. Hates them. If you're Marbury,
Steph.
if you're Billups, they will get rid of you. Doesn't matter. When they have Randy Foye as an option, they will trade Rubio. They will consistently trade away their best guard because they're dumb. Thank you. Levine. This was not the player that he was when they traded him. The guy who we see on a night in and night out basis for Chicago is not the guy that Chicago acquired. So I'm always talking about how players are better younger in today's game, how the learning curve is less steep and there's less progression from the beginning of your career to the end of your career, even though you start out better. Not true for guys like Jimmy Butler. Not true for Zach Levine. Zach Levine has gotten incrementally better every single year he's been in the league, and that's battling injuries. He deserves some respect that he's probably never going to get.
Is he an all-star this year? Should be.
It depends on games played. I mean, I have to check how many games Harden has played in the Eastern Conference. Things like that. Like I try to reward people who have been there every day. I think you should get more credit for that. but he's not better than some of these players. So I would have to draw a line of demarcation.
Tatum and Jalen, both All-Stars?
Yes. Yes.
Over Levine?
Yes. Yes. I got news for you. If Levine was here, he wouldn't be averaging 20. What is he averaging, 28?
Yeah.
He's not averaging 28 in Boston.
Is Jalen averaging 25.5 anywhere else?
If he was the number one, put him in Charlotte. That dude's averaging 29, 28. But, just like Draymond, Jaylen Brown's ceiling is going to be about 4 years. It's going to start this year and end 3 years from now. So you better maximize that window.
Jalen's?
Yes.
Why is it going to be so short?
Because these explosive guys don't last. You know who lasts? Shooters. These guys who were like marginally good in their 20s but are still playing in their 30s are because they had skills, because they weren't relying on athleticism. Shane Battier, Mike Miller, Ersan Ilyasova, these guys weren't that good in their younger careers. They became more valuable later.
You're bringing up Ersan Ilyasova to bring up
Because
make your point?
Because he was drafted at 7. He was the youngest player ever drafted next to Andrew Bynum. 17 years old when it happened. He was a bust and forced to go to China for 2 years. He's never been paid more than today because his skill set has never been more redeemable than today.
Well, I hope someday we can be as good as the Ersan Ilyasova of radio, with the way that you're putting him up there. That's going to do it for us. Open season. We'll catch you next week. Same time, same place. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. We'll catch you then.
Thank you.
I'm just not sure that Kyler Murray is big enough. This is Tom Brady. He's not just going to retire. Whitey, big fan of the show. Appreciate I've got Bryan Murphy to my left, making sure everything's smooth, crispy, buttery.